Today is June 18th, 2019. My name is Karen Neurohr. I'm in the Oral History Research Department at the OSU Library, and I'm here at the library with Dr. Lee Bird. And thank you for coming for the interview today.
My pleasure.
And your title was Vice President of Student Affairs.
Correct.
Here at Oklahoma State University. But we're going to back up a little bit, so tell me a little bit about your background.
Okay. First generation college student and did not anticipate going to college because that's not what our family did. But I, after a kind of an interesting conversation with my adopted sister's mom, who was dying at the time, she said, "You need to go to college." And she was actually the first person who said that, Ruby Sayers. And she said, "You need to think about college." Well, I hadn't. And
how old were you?
17, yeah. And so I actually started at a community college for 1 year and then transferred to the University of Arizona, where I graduated. And I think it was that experience and her kind of gentle pushing that moved me in that direction. So first gen, and my family lived in Phoenix and worked in Phoenix. My mom was a secretary and worked for an attorney and then also a real estate firm. And they were both, I think, incredibly bright, capable people. They just never had the opportunity to go to college. So.
Were they supportive of you going to college?
Not financially, because they didn't have it. But I worked and put myself through college, and they helped as they could. But I just worked a lot and paid for college. And then when I finished that, I found a mentor at the University of Arizona, Dr. Sally Brockman, and she was working on her master's degree when I was getting an undergrad degree. And through our association, she was not so gently pushing me towards higher degrees. She just really did the hard press and said, "You need to do this," and was instrumental in me deciding to get a master's degree, and then came back to the U of A for my doctorate, and she already had her doctorate, and decided I was going to finish that up. So she was probably the primary influence in my educational career.
So your undergraduate degree was in?
Rehabilitation through the College of Education. And I was interested in either social work, working at a hospital, working in juvenile corrections. And I kind of, because of some volunteer work I was doing at the University of Arizona, they had the first information and referrals, one of the first information and referral services, which is kind of what 911 does now. Somebody is sick, they need help, they aren't eating, they've been abused, something horrible has happened in their life and they need help. So I worked on that service very late at night for several years and decided the counseling aspect was really what I enjoyed most. So I changed gears just a little bit and went on for a master's in counseling. Yeah, I'm glad I did. Because that's been very handy throughout my academic career.
And then from there you
worked after my master's degree. I worked at a community college in Yuma, Arizona, kind of I thought it was the armpit of the universe. I actually had an exceptional boss and great people there, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So worked there as a counselor, taught a little bit, short courses for them in the psych program. My minor was in psych, and taught a little bit short course psych courses, and just had a blast. So great experience, and from that experience decided I want to go ahead and get my doctorate. So.
Okay, tell me about that journey for your doctorate.
Slow. I was working full-time at the University of Arizona. Well, this wasn't considered full-time. You certainly didn't get paid full-time, but I was a hall director at the University of Arizona, so I would have a place to live during the course of getting my doctorate. And so worked as a hall director, and then after 4 or 5 years or so, I'd finish up my coursework, but there'd been some changes on the faculty, and I was a little bit slow picking a topic, as many of us are. So I applied for an administrative position, a more senior administrative position, and got that. So instead of just being in charge of one dorm, I was in charge of all the residence halls, not as director of housing, but as kind of the crisis management person, training, student conduct, and programming. So it was busy. And did that until I finished my doctorate in 1991, and then went on to was headhunted for my first job after the University of Arizona, which was fun, great experience, a private liberal arts college in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and did that. They just needed somebody for a year. I did apply for the permanent position and didn't get it, which was heartbreaking because I had a great relationship with the students and the faculty, and we did a lot of changes. They had fired their dean for cause, so this was kind of a difficult time for the campus. Had a blast, thought I was a shoo-in for the permanent job, but they actually hired somebody with more administrative experience than I had, because literally I only had that 1 year as a senior administrator, and it had gone well, but they picked somebody else. And so I moved to the University of, or St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, and from Pennsylvania, and worked there for 8 years as an assistant VP, then a VP, and then moved to Oklahoma here for this position.
So you mentioned your mentor who led you into this career.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about her.
She was just absolutely remarkable, and I think God puts people in our path in unique ways. She knew I was poor. She did not want to. She was just doing stuff to help me. For example, she was quite wealthy and had my wisdom teeth, come into full bloom and needed to have surgery. So I actually ended up at her surgeon's with a very, very small bill, and I always wondered how that happened. So she had paid the majority of it. And I thanked her by throwing up in her brand new Cadillac on the way home from the office. So it was embarrassing and horrible, but we just had just a wonderful connection. Always stayed in touch, connected. She had me take care of her 3 boys. When she was out of town, she traveled quite a bit. She ended up working for the University Foundation and at University of Arizona. And so we just kept in touch and kept that relationship strong. I didn't talk to her all the time after I left Tucson, but we connected in meaningful ways. Took me to real restaurants, took me to the country club, took me to places that I would just normally never see on my own. And I took care of her boys, which gave me a little bit of income, a chance to get out of my little place I was renting. And like I said, I was working a lot. When the leaves fell, they don't generally fall in Tucson that much, but she needed somebody to rake the leaves. So she never just wrote me a check, but allowed me to do stuff to earn my keep. And quite honestly, that kept me in school.
So would you say that she helped socialize you?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I just, I was not in the same circles. Mm-hmm. And I think in her very kind way and sweet way, she just kind of gently moved me in that direction. So, yeah, which was great.
Okay, so was she was a faculty member when you first met her?
She was a staff member and was working in residence life when she was working on her master's degree. And then while I went and did my master's degree, she was working on a PhD. She finished that and then went to work for the foundation at University of Arizona. So, but just kind, good counselor, very kind. During that, my freshman year, I guess sophomore year, my cousin, who I grew up next door to, was diagnosed with osteogenic sarcoma, and had his leg amputated and 5% chance of survival. It spread and went to his lungs, and he just died recently. He lived beyond all odds, but that was a really difficult time. So it was very helpful to have somebody who was kind of the informal counselor. to kind of just go in and see and talk to while I was finishing my degree. And from that, I think a real good friendship developed.
How did your training in counseling and guidance impact your ability to serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs?
I think it was really key, because one of the things, I like students. I don't mind hearing problems. I don't mind when they come to the office all stressed out, and I don't like the screaming, but occasionally. But it was, I think, having a counseling degree was really some of the best background I had for working as VP for Student Affairs, because so much of what we do, especially now with this generation of college students over the last 20 years, has been kind of the emotional crises, financial issues, and not only do I relate to that personally, but I think the counseling background was very helpful.
What other educational training do you think is helpful for leaders of student affairs?
Oh, anything short of combat training, I think, is key. I don't think it requires a SEAL team, but some days it feels like it. I had a real interesting background because I did some things on the way. Three of us, when I was working at my first job at Arizona Western, three of us decided that we were going to go get an EMT license. And it was not that, we never went home anyway, so it was a lot of work to do it. We did it at night, and just on a bet. So the three of us started that. One ran a medical facility as an administrator, a Cigna Health administrator, and the other one went to work as a border patrol officer when he left college. So I did that on a bet, but that actually turned out to be a nice skill set. I was involved with Red Cross from the get-go because my parents were, and became a water safety instructor. Well, it turns out that the hall that they had open at the University of Arizona, when I applied to be a hall director to have a place to live, had a pool. So that turned out to be a good thing. So there's just so many different, I think anything you get that's relatable or kind of relatable, you're using those, a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think it was all invaluable.
Were there other careers that you considered along the way?
Absolutely. I was really interested in doing hospital social work. I'm glad I didn't. I think I've had more impact doing what I've done. I hope I have. But that was the other career. I thought about law enforcement, but I'm at heart kind of a pacifist. My parents both joined the Navy in pre-World War II, and I thought even about the military. But in the day, I could be a secretary for the military, and I decided that really wasn't what I wanted. So, yes, I considered other areas, but that's kind of higher ed is what I landed in. And Karen, I honestly, when I walked onto the campus, my very first job, even though it was in Yuma, Arizona, it's a nice little college, but I thought, oh my gosh, where am I? This is kind of a weird place from Phoenix. And I literally felt like this is where I was supposed to be my entire life. And it was. And I never looked back on that, and I always felt like that's where I was supposed to be, that I found what I was supposed to do, and I loved it. All the different jobs I've had in higher education, I've really enjoyed. This last one was the best, but it really was kind of, I knew it when I landed there. I knew it was the right career field for me.
So what led you to come to OSU?
My parents were getting older, and I decided that I needed to be a little bit closer to them. And quite honestly, the cold was 8 years in frozen Minnesota was getting to me. So I looked for a little bit larger school, and a school that would be a little bit closer to my parents. So I moved, and it was weird. I only had, and our president was leaving at St. Cloud State, and so I applied to the school where he went because I enjoyed him so much, and I applied to OSU. Got offered there at Georgia Southern, and kind of turned it down because of the humidity and environment, and decided, and then took a chance on getting the OSU job.
So how important is it, the president, for someone in a vice president role such as you had here? How important is that relationship?
It's wonderful. And it's not that you see each other a day, you don't need to, but having somebody that really understands the importance of student affairs and what we do is really, really great. And just some of the, whether it's crises or, helping students navigate their new world, I think it's really key to have a president who understands the need for that. Good housing, good food, good services. And again, that's more important now than it probably was when I started. And I had very great presidents to work under.
Which presidents did you work under here when you came? Who was president?
Halligan, Dr. Halligan hired me, and Schmidley, and then Hargis. So it's very different people, very different styles, and Dr. Halligan, I think, had such a unique way and was a great role model for anybody working in higher ed, in my opinion. He said thank you more than any president I've ever worked with, and meant it. A personal note. Thank you for this. Just his kindness, and as well, just their kindness and because it was a much smaller staff in the day. When I started, it was much smaller staff. So whether it was the plane crash, first plane crash, I'd only been here 6 months when that occurred, but it was just his style with people, and how he supported his team was amazing. And I think I learned a great deal from him.
Okay, when you came to OSU, you were coming from a smaller institution, correct?
15,000,
Okay.
and then 18,000 here at the time. So
Okay.
it wasn't.
Not the
No, it's a bigger. It's Big 12.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a striking difference, but it was a little bit bigger in the day. Yeah.
What were some early opportunities that you saw for the position, and what was your approach for those?
Early opportunities with the VP. I think I had an incredible staff then. I left an incredible staff. I think just really the first 6 months is a little bit of a blur. Once the plane crash happened, I got to really understand the heart of this campus and the heart of Oklahoma in a way that I probably wouldn't have had I not had that experiences in this community. I think that was just interesting stuff. Sure.
You're referring to the plane crash of some the basketball.
Yes.
Coaches,
Yes.
players.
Yeah.
In 2000.
January 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just the efforts on behalf of the counseling staff and people backing up the counseling staff. Susie Burks, Trevor Richardson, Cindy Washington. I mean, just those were the 3 or 4 of us that were probably most involved. But just it was just magnificent to watch this small team think creatively about the care of those individuals. I wrote a book chapter on this recently, but David Bosserman, that night, that horrible night of the crash, we were at Frontier Engineering in a meeting talking about how we could best respond, what we needed to do. In that meeting with about 10 or 12 of us there, some actively grieving because they just lost their best friends, we made the decision to do a lead team. Leon Jones, our current police chief, David Bosserman, and a young attorney that worked in the athletic program were our lead team, and they would be the eyes and ears for the family we made a decision to assign a counselor to each family. An HR person was designated to help work with the families. Susie Burks and I, that next morning at 10 a.m., went and visited all the families that lived here and spent time in their homes and talked about their needs and what was going on and how we could help, and provided 24-hour access for any counseling needs, any supportive needs, anything that they needed. And HR did a lot of the, death is hard, and then there's the paperwork. So all the paperwork and what do I do and how do I do that? So and an athletic person was assigned to each family. So they had a little group for each family that was there to make sure that their needs were met. It was remarkable. And I credit Dr. Halligan with making some of those initial decisions. They made the decision to have the memorial on that Wednesday. Well, that's not a whole lot of time with Gallagher-Iba was still being renovated. So they were in dusting the walls and trying to make that an appropriate place. Nestor Gonzalez, our old, one of the PR people, and can't remember her name, worked in PR, Natalie Watkins. Amazing what they did. The service really captured what Oklahoma State was about, I think. So I was learning the culture when I first came, and because of that experience, learned a whole lot more about the culture and the care, and any thoughts I had about did I make the right decision in coming here were pretty much resolved with that incident. And then we turn around in September, we have 9/11, and it was quite a start to a new career. But I was glad I was here. One of my staff sent a message after the plane crash, and she said, "Now you know why you're there." That was her response. Because crises and our office kind of go together, but I think we had the opportunity to serve the campus and the grieving families in a pretty unique way, and just the thoughtfulness of that approach was telling, I think.
You talked about what a great staff you had,
Yep.
office staff.
Yep.
So I'm sure they probably had
Division staff.
Division staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just I had a great office staff too, but the division staff, the directors were pretty amazing.
What changes were there over the years in the structure of that?
Almost none, honestly. I think we should have been a little bit more robust in terms of staffing. We were always lean and mean, and started that way and ended that way. I think the improved salary somewhere about half the way through my time here helped recruit great directors when openings occurred. But the renovation of the Union, Colvin Center, new housing, we were able to accomplish a lot. And that's not me. I may sign off on it, but it's the directors and the vision and our board and the president saying yes to make sure that the programs and services we have are what our students need. And I think that was very helpful. So lots of changes, but in terms of the structure, it almost never changed. I think the only change we had was the wellness center merging to become. It used to be the wellness center and then the Colvin Recreational Center, and that merged into be the wellness department, and that was so I lost a department and then gained a dog park. So.
Were you the first female in this position?
I think so. No, well, Zelma Patchen, I think, was the dean of students here, dean of women, before my time. But in terms of the VP role, yes.
And you mentioned President Halligan in ways that he was helpful. Were there any other people that were people that helped you, mentored you here at OSU that come to mind?
I just think that the nature, I can't think of a single mentor, a single person. I think I lucked out and moved into a very caring community. And it was odd to me that my real estate agent said, if you buy this house, your best friend will be Sandy Barth, who actually worked in HR here for years and years. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. And she said, oh, and Paula Johnson, and these literally, within just months of arriving on campus, just became very dear friends. So I think more than mentoring, I can't say that I had a mentor here, but the support of friends, I knew what I was doing, but the support of friends to get through those crises and the difficult times and student deaths and second plane crash, homecoming tragedy, you name it, they, I think, were more my lifeline than mentors. But wonderful, wonderful people in this community, and our staff. I mean, they were just. I was very close to my directors. Steve Rogers over at Health Centers, University Health Center, and Susie in counseling, and I really had a very tight-knit director staff that worked together well, supported each other well, and so I think between those, my team, and having wonderful neighbors that were filled in some of those gaps. More than mentoring, I think it was just a good community.
Did you have any interaction with predecessors in the role that you were in?
I joined a church where Ron Beer was, and we're friends, but we never really talked about work. So still go there, and we still maintain that relationship. But I really didn't. I don't think that's necessarily healthy. And I think coming in kind of again a horrible situation, but that really helped me know the kind of the talents, the breadth and depth of my team. So I didn't have a need to rely on predecessors to ask questions. And some of the same office staff were there for them and had been there for 30 years. So they kind of knew the history of the department, knew the ins and outs. So no, I didn't tap into that. I knew it was available. Mm-hmm. Had I needed it, I probably would have. But
what departments were you overseeing?
Sure, ask me that, Karen, without a guide in front of me. I'm old and tired. It is, let's see if we can do it. The Student Union, mm-hmm. University Counseling Services, yes. University Health Services, the Counseling Center. Did I mention that? We may have to write them down to get this right. Okay, so
Campus Life.
Campus Life. University Health Services, the Wellness Department, then Sertine and Colvin Rec, now one, Career Services, let's see, Career Services, I'm missing, Dining Services,
Residential Life.
And Res Life, yeah. So eight departments.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But again, you hire great people, and everybody's working hard, and common goals. I think it worked very well. But it was a very large department. We were the only campus in the Big 12 without an AVP.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Or without a dean of students. So there was neither on this campus. It was the VP and the directors, and that's it. And then great staff, other staff, but it was a very, very lean structure and remained that during my tenure.
So in other institutions, that associate or dean would maybe be the first point of contact
Sure.
for these departmental
right.
directors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that did not occur here.
Wow.
And in some ways, that's what I experienced at St. Cloud State as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think I was kind of used to it, and it didn't bother me, but there were times where it would have been nice to have some extra help, administrative help. Mm-hmm. Pam Bowers worked briefly as, I don't know what her title was, maybe it even was AVP. She left after the first year or second year I was here. Tom Keyes was here as director of the union when I came here, and he also carried the title of AVP, but they didn't take 3 or 4 departments and put them, it was just in title. But again, great help. Mitch Kilcrease did that after Tom left. So it was more in name than it was in real structure. And there's not a lot of money available, so we just stayed very lean and mean.
How did the communication work between you and them?
Lots of casual conversations, lots of going to meet with them, walk around, see what was going on. We met as a staff weekly, Tuesday mornings at 8:30, which is exactly the time we were getting together for 9/11. That was kind of interesting. That was stunning. So we met weekly. I did one-on-ones with them in addition to that, just to talk about their needs, what they needed, how I could help, what we were doing. So it was good contact.
How frequent were the one-on-ones?
I did them monthly towards the end with the new staff because I replaced the entire staff. So with the new staff, I was meeting with them more regularly just to see what their needs were. But yeah. And thank goodness for cell phones because we talked regularly all the time.
How did you manage planning, strategic planning? How did that work? How does that work?
It's easier with no money.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If, the bonds for residential life and other things, Dr. Schmidley did a process with trying to do strategic planning for the university, and I honestly don't think it went very well. But we had our goals in terms of what the division was about. We did not change those radically, and those were ultimately kind of adopted by the university with a couple of add-ons. But so we were already doing that process. We were already looking at what we could do. They had just approved the building of the Colvin Center, or the new Colvin Center, when I came. That had just been approved. So that construction process was ongoing. So in terms of our goals and treatment of students, I think we were really clear about what we valued, what we wanted to have happen, and then where we could make progress in terms of the physical plant. We planned to do that and did so.
So a lot of it was values-based then, probably.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just, dig in and I don't like aloof people. I don't see a need for that. I'm often asked by our student development folks, or when I get interviewed, somebody's doing a dissertation about fill in the blank, and I get interviewed pretty regularly, or did, and I think that notion of if you become a senior administrator, you won't have any contact with students is bogus, because I think that's a choice. And about half my day, every day, was spent with students. And I think that's really critical. So they feel comfortable calling in, whether it's SGA in the formal kind of roles of students or just informally. I think it's terribly important for the open door policy actually means open door, and that people can have access. And I gave my phone number out to everybody on earth, to all the parents during orientation. So if you have a problem, call me, and meant it. And I think my staff did too, for the most part. So it was, I think that was, establishing that culture was really important. And I never understood why we were horrified of our VP at the U of A. Just he's out and walking around and everybody's terrified. I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be, a kinder, gentler kind of environment where we are here to serve the students. It's not the other way around. And fear and, being too scared to walk into an office, that just isn't going to get things done. So we changed that.
Okay, so you mentioned open door policy. Is that how you would most characterize your style of leadership?
I think that's probably a question better asked of my staff. But yes, it's close with students, problem solving, and student affairs is very much about problem solving. And we've set up some, we had threat assessment on our campus since 1985, but really changed that in light of Virginia Tech, and created our behavioral consultation team. Also created a student of concern committee and council across campus. So I think there's a lot of students in our office anyway for a variety of reasons. And some of them were good. Write me a letter for a scholarship. Help me do this. How do I navigate this? I'm so pissed off. I want to leave the university. So it was so much of that, but that made it exciting and good. I knew every day what my schedule said. It rarely reflected what walked in the door, and that was exciting.
Okay, you mentioned that there had been in the 1980s some already a foundation for addressing
Right. Threat. Yeah.
Okay. Were there any past issues on campus that lingered that you found as you were moving into this role, and that you had to take into consideration for the way you were managing or leading or doing things?
I think that really happens daily. I don't think there's one point. I think, when we're meeting people, hiring people, working with people, working through crises, you just figure out what works, and just staying agile and figuring it out. And we did that with the kind of transforming our threat assessment into the behavioral consultation team, to really recognize that a lot of faculty, the library, the faculty library, others had students that they were concerned about but didn't really know what to do about it, or how to make a referral, or what services might be available, or that they're free and that readily available. And other departments, such as counseling, modified their services to try to help serve the students. Housing became more involved in the kind of, and we don't consider it necessarily a threat. I think it's more of a students of concern, identifying those students and seeing if we could get the right help to them. We increased the counseling center significantly. So just, I think it's on the fly, just navigating what needs to be done and doing your best to get it done with limited resources.
What were some of the changes in students that you saw over the years?
42 years is a lot of students. I think the most stunning change has been the mental health crisis that I've seen over the past 15, 20 years. More students that are less resilient, more troubled. Some of them have been diagnosed maybe too early. Some of them have not been diagnosed at all. Or some of them are just how to solve problems, how to get from A to B to C, that kind of instrumental independence in students. Those things I've seen a little bit of a decline. Some would say because of the parents, how they were raised, everybody's a winner, not having to navigate because the parents will navigate for them. And as I say that, there are a whole herd of students that don't fit that model either. So it's just, I can see trend lines, but that's not every student, because we have at this university remarkable students. Past, present, future. We attract remarkable students that are capable of amazing things. You look at the Big Ten Senior of Significance, the 10 or 15 students that get that accolade. Look at what they've done. Look at what it's service, it's academics, it's leadership. And those are our principles of what we value, what we want our students to value. Accepting others and diversity, those values are really, so it's not just the mentally ill kids. We have a range of students, but that is a trend that I've seen in the last few years. Also, just with the cost of higher ed going up, the cost of housing, the cost of, it's just hard for students to get and stay in school. So we need to do, and we are, but I think the university raising money to help defray those costs, getting money to do the student scholarships for housing. Those are the things that tend to make a difference. We helped really move forward a fund for students, an emergency fund for students. And that became kind of a big deal during the last 5 or 6 years because I talked about this need all the time and finally got some folks in the foundation to help us promote it a little bit. And it is, for me, the difference between going to graduate school and not was $200. That was a PEO scholarship, I think. $200. I didn't ask for more than I needed, but I needed $200 to fly to Wisconsin because I didn't own a car. So that was my need. And, when that need was taken care of. For our students, it's a coat. It's my computer blew up. And it's a lot of it is leveraging resources to see if we can get the help to the students that need it. And that is another reason why I think my door was open and students came to see me. But it isn't, again, it's not all about that. Mm-hmm. But it's all that and more. It was just a remarkable job, and I'm really blessed to have had it.
What were some changes in families that you saw over the years? Are any trends there that you would come to?
I think there was kind of an observable change with the millennials, just a little bit of parents' involvement and concerns, and HIPAA be damned and FERPA be damned. It's we want information. So I think there was a kind of a subtle change of parents being more involved over the last 20 years or so. But that's fun too. So go do orientation and give them a name and a number so they can call you when they have a problem. It's not insurmountable. It's just it's a stop thing and helping people because they're scared too. Their student is moving away for the first time in their lives and starting this new life, and what's going to happen when they're sick, and what's going to happen if who's going to be there to help them like I've helped them. And again, I think we have a very strong student affairs staff. So if it's housing or counseling or healthcare, all those things, all those people were put in front of the parents to try to ease those concerns and worked pretty well. I think we've got probably we have very elite groups of students. We have very poor groups of students. And I love the diversity of our campus that way. Socioeconomic diversity and the international students and domestic minority students, that we've grown diversity, which I think has been incredibly helpful for this campus. And so with that, a lot of different parents, a lot of different concerns.
That actually was the next topic I wanted to get into.
Okay.
Was diversity on campus.
Yeah.
Describe some of the initiatives and efforts that have impacted the diversity of the campus.
I think it was President Schmidley that identified that need and moved it forward a little bit. But the foundation certainly has the funding, the push in China to get more international students on our campus and other places. So I think there's been a number of efforts to diversify our campus. And some of that is access. It's not just, the students are going to come when they feel like this is an environment where they can be successful. And that is not only just the students themselves, that's having a campus that represents the diversity of our students. So hiring faculty of color, having the diversity on campus attracts more diversity. But you got to start someplace, for us. And we've had initiatives for international students going back to Ethiopia. So this, and 75 years ago or so, probably. So that is a little bit more long-standing. I think I think really supporting the students with program services support. That's really grown in the last 10 years or so here and been very, very strong and very helpful.
Are there any particular changes in that come to mind?
I think having an identified a commander, Jason Kirksey, at the wheel to kind of help guide that effort, make the connections with high schools, meet with students, Precious Elmore, Sanders, working through some of those issues with the students. I think having the programs and services and money to be able to make sure that our campus is accessible for everyone is terribly important, and I think they've been a big part of that.
Talk about the China, the efforts with the Chinese students and the partnerships a little bit.
That was really probably one of my favorite memories and experiences on this campus, as having Vivian Wong, who's now with the international program. She was in my master's class. I think you were in the same class, actually, or very close to it. In that class, and she was getting her master's degree at the time, went on to get a PhD. She kept saying, Dr. Bird, you ought to go to China. Dr. Bird, you ought to go to China. Dr. Bird, you ought to go to China. And she was working with Tim Huff over in our international students and scholars office. And they pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And I said, okay, I'll go. I'm allergic to seafood. Our people were not big travelers, as you could imagine. I'd been to Mexico a few times because you live in Arizona. I'd, crossed the border into Canada once, living in Wisconsin. So I just was not a world traveler. And Vivian and Tim went with me the first time, and we had a blast. All the worries about going to China. I mean, it's a 17-hour plane ride. It's big travel. It's not a little thing. Just had a remarkable experience, and from that, meeting with the folks at Fudan, which is kind of considered the Harvard of China. Tim kept saying, we'll never get in the door, they don't need us. They have partnerships with Cambridge and all over the world, and they don't need us. Well, we were talking about student affairs, and they kind of went like that, and they're now interested, and they know that their student affairs is kind of U.S. 1940s. And how they do things is very different. Structurally, it's very different. But they had an interest in that. And from that, we started, because we went, Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, Guangzhou, made kind of the circuit and met with campuses. And after Fudan said, yes, we're interested, we'd like to do that, we started the International Symposium on Student Affairs, which will eventually open up for other people, other countries, I'm sure. We paid for that ourselves. We made it work. I think we had 35 administrators from China the first year we did this, or 25. They have changed some of their policies this last year, China has, about travel and who can be in and out. So that has restricted us a little bit. But at our high, we had 70 participants. And we do this in June, and it is amazing. So and China's vast, so they may not know each other either. And they don't have some of the structures. NASPA now has an interest in China and their activities. So we started this International Symposium on Student Affairs to bring folks from China to see the American model of student services. Several years later, we were taking our graduate students to China, so they had exposure to a very different form of student affairs than we have. They call it student affairs, but it would be, there's very little specialization, has been very little. In 2006, it was very little. Now they're starting to get more counselors, they're starting to, career services is a little bit more independent, so they're trying to expand services. Honestly, it was like a student affairs, a faculty member, an advisor crammed together, and you're responsible for several thousand students to make sure they graduate. And a lot of pressure and craziness. A little bit higher suicide rate. We're probably on par now, but a suicide rate in China, so they were concerned about the mental health issues. So we created a curriculum on our campus, brought folks in for a week, and shared with them. So they got, and all my director staff participated, and so they get lectures, and then they do tours, and then we do a shopping trip to Oklahoma City, which was very fun. So it was just kind of that exposure. And the folks that came to those early programs advanced faster than on their campuses. And so they saw this as really being very valuable to learn about a different model, how things work. They get a packet of information, they get the PowerPoints, they get resource information. A couple of years we've provided some resource books for them. So we just try to make this a great exposure and for them to get to know each other. So they have colleagues that they can call and work with. So it's really been an odyssey, but it's been amazing and so much fun.
So did that start around 2007?
Yes, it did.
And
we actually had to cancel our first symposium because they had a very, very horrible earthquake in Chengdu, and that was where a lot of our participants were coming from. Hundreds and hundreds of children killed, and building collapses, and so we decided to postpone it until 2017 summer, and that's where we started. And now, people, we don't need the national attention. We don't care about that. We're growing it within China, and it's and meeting their needs, asking what they want to learn about and how we can address those needs. And we've had scholars come over from China to spend a year with us in student affairs, learning about student affairs and how things operate. We've had them in our master's degree program, so it's and doing different exchanges. So it's been a very robust program, and it was such a kind of an innocent way to start, and it's turned out to be pretty amazing. We just finished a couple of weeks ago our 11th.
11th.
Yeah.
So the symposium is actually, it's not just a once a year thing. I mean, it sounds like there are year-round activities and training and education that is occurring.
Like us, we're very relational. The Chinese certainly are very relational. You need to build, and people know where Chicago is, and they know where New York is, and they know where LA is. They don't understand Oklahoma, and frankly. So bringing them to our campus and the clear skies and the beauty of our campus and the size, I think they're quite captivated sometimes when they get here. So they don't know the middle of the country out of nowhere. They know the big schools, the big cities. So this is kind of an adventure for them as well. But we're relational, all of us are. And being able to create programs and services and communication and leadership opportunities with their campuses and our campuses. And then we go visit every other year, generally, sometimes every year, depending on what's going on. But go over and visit and renew those relationships and friendships. Then people feel comfortable sending their kids to a place they've never even heard of. And that really, again, kick-started some unique efforts. So it was very exciting.
So I think you mentioned that you had foundation support from the foundation for?
We paid for the program.
Oh, you paid for it?
Yes,
okay.
And we charged a fee for coming to the symposium, and that fee allowed us to do real rudimentary things, feed the folks, put them up, and the resources that they need. Nobody got paid to do the lectures. Everybody volunteered, and so it was just kind of homegrown, but it's grown a little bit more, and I think it's seen as valuable from the Chinese perspective, those key institutions, and now we're adding institutions to our list of partners, and creating those relationships means that when engineering goes, and Vivian is kind of the core of this, as we well know, but whether it's engineering going or business going or architecture going. Because Vivian and we, the university, have those relationships, it's easier to get things done. So it's started out very slow, but that also gave us the money to be able to fly back to go visit them and do lectures and do meetings with staff and take care of other needs. So that helped facilitate that whole activity. It was not done by the foundation.
Okay. So is there an umbrella term for this Chinese program?
It was just the International Symposium on Student Affairs. Yeah.
Okay. Is it still just Oklahoma State University?
It is. We've had, it is us, yes. And, I think we've done a few side trips so they can see a technical college, Okmulgee, or community college, but it's really focused on campus. So they do have a little bit of time to really tour and go look at career services or counseling, or how are we organized, what do we do, what does a day look like, what is the specialized training that's required. So it's really focused on us.
Mm-hmm. Is this one of the top things that you feel like you've been involved in here?
Absolutely. It's just been a lot of fun and great relationships all over China. And again, from first gen kid who never traveled, it was quite an experience.
Are you still involved in the program?
Yes, I did one lecture for Vivian last week or 2 weeks ago, and hope to be able to continue that relationship.
Talk a little bit about diversity and the opportunities it affords for student learning and growth.
I think there are very few things that are more important than the diversity of the campus. Because in some rural areas around Oklahoma, we don't have a great deal of diversity. And I think coming and that was part of the engineering feat of the student union, by the way, was for the second floor, was to create interaction pockets, places where people would want to come together and would see each other and visit. But I think that is, and we need to continue it. We need to strengthen it. But I think some of our students come from very rural areas. Their exposure to any diversity, international, domestic, anybody, is different. And I think that is so critical for this campus and critical for the students themselves. They're going to enter a workforce that is very diverse. And if you don't know how to work with people, you don't know how to, you've never had any exposure, you're fearful of whatever it happens to be, this is a great place to get rid of that, to learn how to work with people that are from the big city or any kind of diversity. It's just, this is a great environment for them to learn. And I think, again, the efforts of our diversity VP for diversity has really helped in that regard. But it's more than that. It's not just a scholarship. It's getting the whole campus to be diverse and to look more diverse. Our administration is not terribly diverse. I think we need more diversity even within that platform. So I think it's going to be an ongoing quest, but I think the real value of that is for individual students to learn about that it's not about them, and that this is, and not be so ethnocentric, so dogmatic. And that's the fun of student development and the fun of student learning anyway, is you come, you're exposed, you make mistakes, you change, you learn, and to see the students come in as a freshman and have them walk out the door as a senior or graduate student, it's phenomenal. That'll bring you back every day,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is one of the most critical things we can do is the leadership development, and part of that is not just an appreciation for diversity or acknowledgement of it, but really working with people that are different and building bonds, building ties, building unique programs that come from that. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but we need to do more.
You mentioned Oklahoma, and some of our students aren't exposed to much diversity with their backgrounds. Is there anything unique about Oklahoma that comes to your mind in terms of that? The rural, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've got some of that almost anywhere in the country. There's I don't think we're unique in that regard at all. I think one of our uniqueness, one of the things that makes us unique, is that just for the most part, our students, I think, are eager to learn and are open to change. And I see that, again, that freshman to senior transition, and perhaps that's true everywhere, but I see it more here because the exposure, the leadership, the music, the symphony, that's part of this learning process at a major university. That's that opportunity. International travel. Foundation has helped us set up some funds, and a donor family in New York City has helped us establish $50,000 for international travel. If you're like me, you don't do international travel, your parents don't, you aren't on cruises, you aren't doing any of that. So this was an opportunity to help those first-gen kids have the opportunity to do some international travel. Those investments in those students are life-changing. You're not the same. You come back with a great appreciation of the United States, but I think a broader worldview, and that, things are different and they matter more. So I think having those experiences for our students is just remarkable. I don't know if I answered your question appropriately, but
I think, yes.
I don't think it's unique. In Minnesota, we have a lot of kids from rural areas and kids from Minneapolis and Chicago, and so we aren't unique that way. But a caring community and people who the desire to learn and to risk, I think that's a little bit higher here than it was even in Minnesota or Arizona, and even Pennsylvania. It's just I think. The willingness to learn and change and the willingness to expose yourself to kind of new adventures is something that this university provides. We just need to keep pushing to help them have that exposure. And again, that's music, art, culture. It's all that and more.
One of the things that I've seen change since I've been here is the way that the Native American students are supported
Yes.
on this campus. Could you talk about that a little
Sure.
bit?
I think starting the Sovereign Nations Center, the involvement of the sovereign nations on our campus, getting the leadership from the sovereign nations invested in our community and we being invested in theirs, I think has made a huge difference. I think that is certainly, we've for years and years had the best production of graduation rates for Native American doctoral students. I'd like to see that not only be for the doctoral students but for the country. And with those support services that Elizabeth and her team provide, I think great things are possible. And it's not one way. It can't be one way. It needs to be both ways. The university, again, investing and looking for opportunities to build not only the university, but the sovereign nations. The Sovereign Nation Speaks, the different programs, the awareness, I think that's been really, really great and needs to continue.
What have been some of the challenges when it comes to diversity on campus? I know that some of our students probably had some DACA issues, challenges and concerns and worries when that
Absolutely.
all became publicized. Can you talk about that a little bit and maybe some of the other challenges?
I just wrote a chapter on that as well. I think we've had. I want to see the DACA issue get resolved. I wish it were already. Very close to several DACA students and their uncertainty. They paid to be DACA students. You pay to get into the DACA program. And I think their disappointment and uncertainty is bad for them and bad for this country. So I don't want to get too political, but I would just tell you that this is something that I think is so critical. I don't even know where to begin. So that's the best protest I participated on this campus, and I did participate. I think it's so important that we move forward and create pathways to citizenship, to recognize as these students came over with their parents that they are more American than anything, and I want that to be meaningful and positive. And I think we've lost sight of nationally that this is, we are a nation of immigrants. We are, and this is to be valued, not shunned or scared of. And I think that's a political disaster. But I'm hoping that changes. But it was, in fact, it was right in front of the library, and that was a great experience.
Yeah, tell me a little more about that, the protest.
The students, HSA students, Hispanic Student Association and others wanted to do a protest. They decided on a silent protest. They were backed up and supported by our staff and by the staff of the diversity office. Not to lead, not to push, not to do anything, but to help keep students safe. And it was not too far after the election, and a lot of tensions were high. And it was very well done. Students made a variety of posters. Faculty, staff, and students were on either side of the library main walk. And there were several hundred people there. And our law enforcement was there, and others were there to make sure that everything stayed safe. And it's not just the protest itself, it's the conversations that come through that. And the wonderful programs at both Residential Life, Leon McClinton has done, and the International, our Diversity Office has done, to create forums for conversations around these issues. We bring it to the table to our campus and had many of our student leaders go through that training, which helps them understand how to talk to each other about critical issues. It was kind of expensive. I think we should be doing it every year because it was just amazing. Why do I believe what I believe? What motivated my belief system, and am I where do I see myself on a continuum, and gaining that introspection through conversation to say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know DACA had this. Oh, I didn't know that's what the purpose is. Oh, I didn't know. A lot of people form their opinions without having a lot of information. So I think having those conversations campus-wide are really critical and need to be supported in every way possible. Again, they're excellent. We need more students to come. We need more staff and faculty to be involved in those conversations.
So Bring It to the Table, is that a national
Yes.
initiative?
Yes. Yeah. It has a documentary. It's quite humorous, actually. And then they do a little bit of training around that, and they have a curriculum that they leave with the campus. But you need to have the leadership to develop that and move it forward. There's now another one, Our Better Angels, which is a national program, and it's free, very similar. We've got some folks in the community that are advancing that. And both programs are great because recognizing where you came from, who you are, why you believe what you believe, and why other people believe the way they believe, and they have a right to do that. I think all of those things are really critical, and especially at this age, and especially for our students to really learn to understand why they believe what they believe, and to understand that there's gaps in knowledge. You don't need to go to college if you know everything. But there is this opportunity to learn, and to learn from others, not just from a book. And exposure and interaction and working together and playing together, it is critical. There's really some interesting things about, and this is a little bit older, I'm not sure it's still as active, but our Latin dance group that we had on campus was one of our larger programs, and was the most, in and of itself, was the most diverse organization we had on campus, because a lot of people like to dance and want to learn Latin dance. Great parties, great events, great learning opportunities. And it's natural. It's not compelled. It's not in the face of a crisis. It's not because you were told to. It's because there's this opportunity to learn and to challenge yourself, to become more informed, and to really analyze, why do I believe what I believe, and am I open to changing? And that's, I think, the value of both of those programs. We've also had a real warts incidents on this campus. Again, not unique to OSU, but where social media is a blight sometimes, where students say and do stupid things, and that are clearly racist, and oftentimes clearly protected speech, but that forms a crisis. And I think our campus has a pretty good way of dealing with those issues that's been developed over time, and I think that's very positive.
Okay, the second program was Our Better Angels.
Our Better Angels.
Okay.
Neat program.
Okay.
The CIA woman that's done lots of volley classes and is working with that program nationally. It's neat. And you've done dialogues here in the library. I mean, this is, whether it's literature, or learning, or people, or speakers, bringing interesting, different speakers to campus. This is all part of that learning process, not just getting your degree. And the more that we can offer, I'm excited about our music program. I'm excited about, I've seen more world leaders on this campus than any other campus I've ever been on. So that's pretty neat, and little sleepy Oklahoma State, no, not so much. You just don't know enough about us. And that's kind of what's exciting about being here is there's so many opportunities if you take advantage of it. And so it's a cool place.
Okay, let's shift back a little bit to some of the departments that you were overseeing.
Sure.
And
I'm sure I forgot one too, and that's both embarrassing and horrifying.
Counseling, student union, campus life, Greek life, health services, career services, dining, res life, wellness, and recreation.
Wellness is recreation and dining,
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Across all of those diverse areas, really, they truly are. What are some of the you talked about counseling and changes in that. What are some of the other significant changes that stand out to you when you think about those different areas? What comes to your mind?
I think one of the neat things is what we're doing with wellness. President Hargis and the First Lady actually pushed us in the direction of having focusing more on wellness and healthy foods and Choose Orange, those programs, early programs, and I think that push has turned out to be really remarkable in terms of what we're able to do. Dr. Meisner is doing one of the largest resilience programs in the country. And that's been possible because of folks over in enrollment management that allow us to look at students when they come in and look at students over time to look at resilience. Why do some students fail? Why do some students succeed? What are the components of that? It impacts retention. It impacts your sense of wellness while you're here. Mental health crises. How can we identify students in need? So it's using good research and using that research then to design programs that are meaningful for the students in the wellness program, and to really study to understand the phenomenon of resilience and kind of success and stay power to finish your degree here, and using that to help shape orientation programs, shape the experiences that they get, and help get students. One of the key factors is getting students involved faster. I'm forgetting the name of the program, but started a program with Campus Life and the Student Union and a variety of others to really work on engagement as a singular focus, to get students using social media, to get students and some publicity, to get students more engaged. And we have found if students will get engaged, if they don't just sit in the room, if they'll get engaged, health services, programs with our Campus Life, clubs, organizations, all that, their survival rate is much higher than if they don't. So really trying, if we know this from our research, how do we apply it? And that's really I think the art of student affairs leadership is the collaboration to see the research collaboration, what do we need to do? And let's be willing to try, even if it's incredible failure. Let's be willing to try to do something that's going to have an impact. 5% retention rate on our campus is 200 students. So you want to have a 5%, let's get 200 more students involved. Let's see if that works. Let's see if we can give them more state power. That's not the only variable. It's money. It's finding work. It's doing so much. Doing your homework. Staying academically viable. But it's also about getting engaged on the campus. Meeting faculty, meeting staff, finding a cool place to study, finding people to study with, involvement, leadership. It's all that. So that's been a really exciting program. I think it just started a few years ago, but because our previous wellness experiences, I don't think were really student focused. So now I think we're focusing the right energy on the right target and coming up with really pretty ingenious ways to use the research to really help students be more successful on our campus. And that's terribly exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is. Is there any other research that comes to mind that's had some impacts?
Sure. I think we've done changes, and some of it is staffing changes, and some of it is just time and involvement, and health services has changed. I think it was good. It's great. It has a nationally accredited at the highest level and has been for the last 21 years or so. But they've done modifications. How do we serve our students? How do they know about us? So they've made modifications both in the facility and staffing and other things to help attract more students to come in and get that well checked, get a little bit of help. No, it's not a scary place to go. So there's been, some changes don't need to be just a building going up, although we needed that in Res Life and other places. Sometimes change is convincing the staff that they can have an incredible difference in the lives of the students if they commit to that and if they want to do it. And I think that's why we've had so many people stay so long at the university, is because they find that fun factor, they find that engagement factor, and that's the exciting part about being in student affairs, honestly.
When you say people staying long at the university, are you referring to employees?
Yes, and being able to attract high-quality directors. That helped when we elevated our salaries a little bit too, but that we could draw from a national group. But it's also just hiring the kind of people that really want to serve students. That's serving students was the highlight of my day every day, and I think it should be the hallmark of our programs and services and as a university. We do other things, but that's really job one. That's our product. That's the promise, that's the future, and putting your energy on making those students successful. Support services, help, programs, activities, exposure, all that has to be a focus. And again, we do many things at the university, but I think for student affairs that really became our focus, and it's kind of showing, I think.
You touched on the importance of building projects, changes there.
Yeah.
And you saw a lot of that.
We did.
In your time here.
Got rid of a lot of old housing that, and housing is expensive. That many toilets, it's just expensive. I learned that yesterday. It is, we needed to do some changes. The renovations to the Colvin Center, the renovations to the Student Union to make it a welcoming place. Literally the engineering, the purposeful engineering of where we put students. Students should not be in the basement. Students need to be in an upper floor where they have more exposure and can see each other, so they're more apt to work with each other. And that was part of the redesign, and the students supported it. I mean, they're excited about it. Mitch Kilcrease took the committee and went and looked at the best and the most horrible student unions in the country as part of this planning process. And students need to know what's out there, and they need to know it's not just size. How do we engineer this to be a place where you want to go, a place where you want to meet others, a place where you want to work? And I think they did a remarkable job of that. Housing, again, the cost of housing to build new housing, but we really needed to get rid of some of our housing. And but then we need to make sure that we shore up some of those financial issues because the new housing is more expensive than old housing. Leon McClinton has not just changed the physical character of the buildings, but really changed the programs and activities and structures there as well. So it's not just building a new building. If you've got staff that are grouchy and horrible, change the building that you want. But you need you need the whole package. Good facilities, safe facilities, welcoming facilities, and then you need staff that really like students and want to serve them. And when those things come together, it's pretty cool. And then a little bit of money to be able to afford to live there. But those are some of the changes. Union, the Colvin, and I think housing have been the most stunning.
As the Vice President for Student Affairs, were you having to be involved in fundraising for these different projects in any way?
A lot of it is, they're auxiliaries, so they raise the money and pay off those, through for housing. You can get the bonds and sell the bonds, and then we pay back those bonds through enrollment and the fees that they pay. Similar with the Colvin Center and the Student Union bonds help do that. So that wasn't necessarily, although Joe Weaver and others have been very helpful with many of these projects. These are really bonding and paying it back. And yes, so the fundraising, yes, we've done a little bit. A lot of it in the last few years, we're focused on the emergency fund, which has gone from $8,000 from Joe Weaver's office, which simply wasn't enough, to I think it's over $100,000 now that we work with. Done some fundraising working with families of students who have died to help establish scholarships, and then done a little external fundraising to help build programs like the international travel for first-gen kids. So creating the opportunities and then looking for donors who want to be a part of that future. And the directors do the same thing. They go out and they look for those opportunities, and we've had quite a bit of funding for the wellness programs, for the resilience study. And I do think people want to help. We just have to connect the passion, as Foundation always says, connecting the passion to the program and seeing if we can make a marriage there. So, yeah. We've had some very good years. We've had $1 million years fundraising and some not so good years. So,
when you look around Stillwater and see all of the apartments being built and going up, it's just a really drastic change from when my kids first came to school here, and then when I came to work here too. Right. So comment on that a little bit.
I think we're overbuilt horribly. I'm a little bit surprised that the city has allowed the nature and the type of housing. While some people think it shows progress, when buildings can't open because they're not built right or not very livable, I think that's very problematic. And the density, this is where the students want to be so they can walk or get a scooter or whatever, I get that. But the density of population right around the university, I don't think is the best thing. So whether it's, and they can become little slums. They're bad behavior, bad supervision, hard for the police to monitor. I ride with the police regularly just to help show support and go out to some of the horrific places and have looked at the construction, I've just seen a lot. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot in 42 years. I think the construction and I worry about it because I think we're overbuilt for the size of community and campus. And it hurts housing on campus, and it's not a competition necessarily. That was a big issue when I came here. It is, I think it's more about the quality of life that the students experience on or off campus. And I think having students live on campus, even though this is the first campus where I've ever had that, I think, I think it's a wonderful thing. Get students acclimated, get them to know the university, help them understand what the university is about. Lots of programs, lots of services to get them acclimated. I think that's really healthy. As a junior, senior, sophomore, you want to move off campus, great. But I do worry about some of the, these are still 18-year-old kids, 19-year-old kids, and we want them to make good decisions, and we want them to go to class and, do the right things. And I think that's a little bit easier when they're staying in res life than when they're off campus. But that depends on the student. Again, we have a lot of students that do just fine living off campus and still make their way and do wonderful things. But I do think we're overbuilt, and I think the density that we've created around the university is not necessarily desirable.
I think this is probably a good stopping point
Okay.
for today. I would like to schedule another time for us to get together.
Sure.
Because there are several other topics that I would really like to get
We can do that.
your take on.